Hello everyone, welcome back, Iron Sentinel. The story that began with the destruction of Mossad headquarters has not ended. In fact, the consequences are only beginning to unfold. What was once seen as an isolated strike has turned into a cascading series of events, shaking not only Israel, but the entire global order. Overnight, the region has transformed into a chessboard, where every move by Israel, Russia, Iran, and the United States could determine whether this remains a regional confrontation or escalates into a global war. The atmosphere in Tel Aviv is tense, intelligence chiefs are scrambling, and the Israeli population now faces a reality they have not felt in decades. The feeling that their government has lost control of security. Citizens who once placed unwavering faith in Mossad and Israel's air defense systems now question whether those institutions can protect them from the storm that is building on all sides. The first waves of analysis reveal a disturbing truth. This was no symbolic strike. It was a carefully orchestrated dismantling of Israel's deterrence. Israel's leadership thought its greatest strength lay in the perception of invulnerability. But by striking Mossad's headquarters, Russia and Iran demonstrated that even the most secure fortress can fall. The implications of that message are spreading rapidly. Hezbollah in Lebanon has already begun testing Israel's northern borders with rocket fire. Militias in Iraq are declaring readiness to open new fronts. Yemen has celebrated with promises of additional strikes, hinting that its hypersonic missile program may soon be directed toward Israel. The bombing of Mossad headquarters was not the end. It was the trigger for a wave of coordinated pressure designed to stretch Israel beyond its limits. Inside the Israeli security establishment, panic has been replaced by a desperate need to respond. The cabinet has already authorized retaliatory measures, but the challenge is unprecedented. Retaliation against Iran risks all-out war. Retaliation against Russia risks drawing the United States directly into a confrontation with Moscow, something Washington is hesitant to do while still entangled in Ukraine. The options on the table are limited and dangerous. Cyber strikes against Iranian infrastructure, assassinations of key figures involved in the planning, or covert operations to disrupt Russian assets in Syria are being discussed. But all of these carry enormous risk of escalation. Israel has always played offense, relying on the doctrine that the best defense is a preemptive strike. Yet after the Mossad bombing, Israel's options feel defensive and reactive, a position that undermines decades of strategy. Russia, on the other hand, is playing its role with calculated precision. Intelligence leaks indicate Russian electronic warfare systems blinded parts of Israel's air defense network during the strike. This explains how incoming missiles slipped past the Iron Dome and David's sling systems, reaching the very heart of Tel Aviv. Moscow is sending a clear message to Washington. Your technology cannot save your allies when we decide to intervene. Beyond military measures, Russia is also capitalizing diplomatically, presenting itself as the protector of the Middle East against Western interference. In the United Nations, Russian diplomats are turning the narrative upside down, portraying Israel as the aggressor and Iran as the victim of decades of covert sabotage. This dual strategy, military intervention combined with diplomatic shield, strengthens Moscow's role as the central power broker in the region. Iran is celebrating its greatest strategic victory in decades. For the first time, it has inflicted a direct wound on Israel's intelligence core. The symbolism of Mossad headquarters in flames is being broadcast on Iranian media non-stop, and across the Middle East it has energized resistance movements that have long operated under Tehran's influence. But Iran is not stopping at propaganda. Intelligence reports suggest Iranian missile factories are operating at maximum capacity with advanced drones, precision-guided rockets, and even hypersonic prototypes being prepared for deployment. Iran's strategy is clear: overwhelm Israel's defenses through numbers, precision, and coordination. By combining its technological advances with the support of Russia's intelligence infrastructure, Iran is positioning itself not as a regional nuisance, but as a peer competitor to Israel in terms of strategic reach. The safety nets Israel has relied on are rapidly failing. Iron Dome, once considered nearly flawless, is now showing cracks. Its interceptors can be saturated by large volleys, and its radar can be disrupted by electronic warfare. David's sling and arrow were built for higher altitude threats, but they cannot handle low-flying drones or swarming tactics. Israel is realizing that its multi-layered defense designed with billions of dollars in U.S. funding is vulnerable in ways its enemies are learning to exploit. This has sent shockwaves across the Western defense industry. If Israel's systems can be breached, then what does that mean for NATO defenses in Europe or U.S. set bases across the Middle East? The psychological damage is immense, spreading far beyond the battlefield. Markets have already responded to the chaos. Oil prices spiked immediately after the bombing, as fears of a broader war affecting the Strait of Hormuz grew. Investors are pulling money from Israel worried about prolonged instability. Tourism, one of Israel's major industries, is collapsing overnight. The ripple effects extend into global economies where energy markets are jittery, and governments are scrambling to prepare for the potential fallout of another Middle Eastern war. The financial price of this conflict is already staggering, and it has only just begun. For ordinary Israelis, the human price is the most unbearable. Families in Tel Aviv spent the night in shelters listening to the echoes of explosions. Parents are struggling to reassure children who are no longer convinced the skies above them are safe. The sense of vulnerability has seeped into daily life in a way that Israel has not experienced since the wars of the 1970s. And unlike those wars which were fought on conventional battlefields, this conflict is unfolding inside Israel's own cities, striking the very institutions that once gave its people confidence. The United States now faces an impossible dilemma. If it stands back, it risks watching one of its closest allies be humiliated and weakened, emboldening Russia and Iran to push further. If it steps in, it risks escalation with Russia that could ignite a global war spanning from Ukraine to the Middle East. Already USS aircraft carriers are moving closer to the Mediterranean, a show of force designed to deter further Russian and Iranian strikes. But deterrence is fragile, and one miscalculation could tip the region into a spiral no one can control. Washington knows that its credibility is on the line, but so is global stability. The shocking reality is that the Mossad headquarters strike was not an end but a beginning. It has exposed vulnerabilities, emboldened adversaries, and placed Israel in the most precarious position it has faced in decades. The storm clouds are gathering quickly, and every player knows the stakes. Israel will not accept humiliation without retaliation. Russia will not back down after publicly flexing its strength. Iran will not waste the momentum it has gained. The United States will not abandon Israel without consequences. And the Middle East, already fragile, is now balancing on a knife's edge. What comes next could redefine the world order. Will Israel risk direct confrontation with Iran, striking its nuclear facilities in a desperate bid to restore deterrence? Will Russia escalate further, deploying more forces to Syria and threatening to set the assets in the region? Will Iran push its proxies into full-scale war with Israel, opening multiple fronts at once? Or will the United States intervene decisively, forcing all sides into a broader confrontation? Each scenario carries risks that could ignite not just the Middle East, but the entire global stage. One truth stands out above all. The era of illusions is over. The illusion of invulnerable defenses, the illusion of untouchable intelligence networks, the illusion of global stability, all have been shattered. What remains is a raw and dangerous reality in which power is tested through direct confrontation and survival depends on who is willing to pay the highest price. The bombing of Mossad headquarters will be remembered not only as a historic strike, but as the spark that lit a much larger fire. And as this fire spreads, the world watches, stunned, anxious, and aware that we may be witnessing the beginning of a conflict whose end no one can predict. Hey.